In this last video, we'll look at sharing and publishing ArcGIS projects to ArcGIS Online, where you can create web maps for people who don't have ArcGIS credentials and login details to view and interact with. So first we'll look at publishing data to the web, then at creating a public interactive web map, and then at creating a simple querying web map app. First, I'd like to show you how you can share a layer from your ArcGIS Pro project into the ArcGIS Online space. So the layer that I have on display here is that layer of properties around London. And in order to bring that into ArcGIS Online, we right-click the layer in the Contents pane and go to Sharing, and then to Share as Web Layer. And that brings up this window in which we have to fill out a few settings. So we give the layer a name in the way we want to save it in the online space, and a brief summary, so properties, and also give it a tag so that you can later search your different layers based on their tags that you've given them. We'll choose to save as a feature layer, and location refers to where within your ArcGIS Online space you want to save it. So I've actually created a separate folder in my online space called London Properties, so we'll put it there. And this next section is important because this is where you have control over who you decide to share this layer, so this information with. You can either share it publicly, so this means that anyone with an ArcGIS Online account can search for any layers with this name and find this and start using it in their projects. So if that's something you don't want to be doing, you could consider sharing it only with all the members of your organization by keeping this box ticked, or even specific groups within your organization. But say that this is a layer that is really just private and confidential, you just keep these boxes unticked and it won't be able to be visible or usable by anyone else. So now we can go ahead and publish this, which typically takes a moment, kind of depending on your internet speed. So whilst that is loading, we can already go into ArcGIS Online to see what it kind of looks like. So here we are in my account. I've gone to the content tab and specifically into my content. So this is all my private content, where, as you can see on the left, I've created a number of folders for my different projects, and this one is called London Properties. At the moment, it's still empty, but we're waiting for that layer to load into it. And yeah, it's worth saying, if you wanted to add a new folder, you could do that with this symbol over here. There's also the option to add files from different sources, so not by loading them directly in from ArcGIS Pro, but rather from a file that already exists on your computer or from a URL or something else. And yeah, so we're in my content at the moment, but there's also the content that's shared across members of myself and my organization's members in this tab. So that's semi-public. And then the Living Atlas is completely public data that can be used and shared by everyone else. So let's just go back into our ArcGIS Pro interface, and we can see that the layer has successfully loaded up. So if I refresh this page, we can see that my layer has loaded. So this symbol here indicates that it's only shared with myself, so no one else can actually see it, which is good. And if we click on this layer, it gives us an information window. And from there, we can choose to open it in a map viewer. And the map viewer is essentially the online equivalent of ArcGIS Pro. It has slightly less capabilities, but still fair amount of the spatial analysis capabilities. So the way it looks is it's got a big interactive web map on which you can zoom just however much you like. And on this you can set a base map depending on your preferences. So we could just choose to go back to the one that we had before. And as you can see, my properties layer is now loaded. And it essentially looks all the same as it did in ArcGIS Pro. Here you've got your contents pane, which looks similar to ArcGIS Pro, a bunch of analysis tools, and the option to save and share your project. So now I'd like to show you how you can go from this ArcGIS Online map viewer kind of editor interface into a finalized map product that you can share with someone who does not have ArcGIS login details and who cannot view this from the sort of GIS editor side of things, but just wants to see a final map product which is zoomable and in which you can click on different features to see what they are. And in ArcGIS Online, by default, if you click on features, it displays a pop-up box with information from that feature's attribute table corresponding to that point or polygon or line. And it's worth saying that you can configure these pop-up boxes, which is worth looking up how to do, but that's a separate tutorial entirely. Now, what I've done to the properties is actually change the symbology quickly so that it corresponds to what the different kinds of properties are, and this is done really quickly by going on this icon here, change style, and go to select what attribute in the attribute table you want to, or what field in the attribute table you want to symbolize by, and then clicking done. So that's worth saying that that's something you can do in ArcGIS Online. And also I thought it'd be good to just have one other layer on display to let you know that you can actually display multiple layers in one web map rather than just one layer. So I've added some drive time catchments from our ArcGIS Pro project. So I uploaded this and published it to my ArcGIS Online space as well. And I added that by simply pressing add here and search for layers, and this then goes through my private content, but you can also search to or choose to search in the organization or the Living Atlas, for example. And then all you really do is, if you find the layer you want it to be adding, is click that little plus symbol and that adds it to your map. I've now added it twice, so I'm just going to throw one of these away by clicking here and removing it. Yes. So now let's say that this is the final map that I want to share with a client who has paid for this information, for example. What you have to do is make sure that you save your project, because we've previously saved individual layers, and now this is a project that combines them in one interface. And finally, what you do is click on the share button, and again, here there's the option of deciding if you want to be sharing this into a public map or only within your organization or certain groups. And this is where you get a URL, which you can then either choose to share within members of your organization or with members of the public. So again, the control is there to make that conscious decision who it's to be shared with. So if we click create a web app here, it brings us into a gallery of all sorts of different map displays and formats and layouts that you can choose from. And it's really worth going through all of these and seeing which are most appropriate for the different kind of maps that you want to be sharing. Some are more elaborate with more functionality and more room to write things down and give more information, and some of them are pretty simple and are basically just a map with a legend, such as this one, interactive legend. So if we click this and create a web app out of this, it asks again to give that a title and some tags and a summary, and to choose a place where you want to share it. So again, in my London properties folder. Now this launches into sort of a final interface where you can set the last or configure the last couple of settings about your map. So this is where you can give it a specific title and specific colors sometimes, and choose where the legend is going to go. So the map format that I chose was interactive legend. So this means, for example, that users can choose to turn off certain types of properties and only look at some of them. And again, you can see that this is zoomable and stuff. And if they wanted to, they could turn on or off those catchment areas of drive time. And yeah, what you want to do is go through these steps of the final configurations of your map. So we've already selected what kind of map we want to use. give it a title. Properties map is fine. This is where you choose some interactivity. So maybe you also want to have a zoom button in there. So now users can zoom to specific layers that are on display. You can play around with all of these things. And theme and layout allows, for example, to change this into a dark mode and shift your legend to a different corner of the map, if that were of interest. Now, if you're quite happy with that, what that finally looks like, you can test it on different devices, or on mobile, or on a desktop screen, and then publish that, confirm, and once it's published, it's ready to be shared with uh, a client or anyone that you want to be sharing this with. You just give them the URL and they can look at this map and zoom in and out of it as much as they like and interact with the features. The final thing I want to show you is a web map that is allowing the users to carry out slightly more spatial analysis. So instead of just displaying the data and allowing people to zoom in on it and click on features and select based on only property types, we now want to create a web map app that also allows them to do some basic querying of the different fields in the attribute table of the properties. So to select properties not only on the type of property, but also on their size and their lease value. And the way that we're going to do this is by, from the map viewer, which is that ArcGIS Online editor interface, go to share. And this time, instead of choosing from one of the configurable apps, which are the really nice layouts, we're going to use the web app builder. Again, have to fill in some tags in a summary, and we'll call this the properties map of London. This launches into one of our products called the ArcGIS Web App Builder, which there's quite a lot to it, but it's broken down really easily. Essentially, what you see on the 2/3 of the screen is what the end user would be seeing as well. And on the left side of the screen, it asks you to make selections and preferences in 4 different steps. So I'm just going to scratch the surface here. First, you select a theme that looks good to what you want your map to convey. So there's a bunch of different themes with a bunch of different colors. Then you select the map that you want to have on display. So in this case, we've launched into the web app builder from the web map itself already. So that means that it has the correct data on display already. So we don't need to change this. And there's a bunch of other settings that you can customize in this window. But we won't really go into all of that now because I just want to focus on how we can create an option for the end user to query the properties, which is done within the widgets section of configuring our web app. And this is a section where it allows you to set a lot of different functionalities within the web app that you're creating. So there's some standard ones like, oh, do you want a coordinate, like a bit of information at the bottom of your map which says what coordinate system this is in. And there's other bits like, do you want a scale bar or do you not want that in? But mostly what's important is that you can create widgets that allow end users to do really simple sometimes, but even up to quite advanced bits of spatial analysis on your web map. And the one that I just want to demonstrate is the filter. So this is one of, I want to say, at least 50 different widgets on which there's a lot of really good documentation if you want to look into the other ones. But we're going to do the filter one. And what this allows me to do is to create a filter based on my properties layer and set, well, I'll give it a name, selecting properties. And set different expressions from based on fields in the attribute table that people are going to be able to fill in to find different properties. So firstly, I want people to be able to filter the properties based on their type. And I want to make it easier for them by giving it a unique list of values to pick from so that they won't be able to fill in property types that don't exist. For example, what kind of property types don't exist in London, like maybe farms or something, like that won't be a problem. And we're going to add a few more expressions in really simple, um, similar styles to the one that I've just created. And I'll show you in a moment what the final result of that is going to be. Unique, ask for values, but you can configure this in so many more ways if you wanted to. And finally, we want to allow end users to filter the different properties based on lease value. And again, I'm putting unique values and values of this field so that they can't put in lease values that don't exist. And then I'm going to tick some of these boxes to customize it a bit further and press OK. And now what's happened is that I've created a widget in the top window of the top corner of my web application. And if users were to use this, they could click on it and fill in the kind of property type that they are interested in, for example, an office. And if they turn on this filter, you can see that it's only highlighting offices in the map. And you can use however many of these filters you like to use at once. So if you want to use all three of them, you could, for example, fill this in as size. Well, we only want a size of at least 2,000 square meters. So that leaves even less offices. And the lease value has to be 10,000. So that filters it down even more, but you could set however many filters you wanted to. And that is a very simple interactive web map with slightly more capabilities in terms of querying done by end users. So you could then save this and also launch it. And this is what the end user who does not need to have an Esri license would see to use this. It's just loading. Might just refresh that. There we go. As you can see here, they can start using that filter.